Welcome to the Equal Value Podcast. My name is Lisa. I'm your host. I'm also the founder of a nonprofit called Black Brown Diverse Plant-Based People for Equity, also known as BBDPBE. You can find us at our website at www.equalvalueforall.wordpress.com. And you can hit anywhere you see a donate button if you'd like to donate to us. That money goes directly to giving people free plant-based food items in the community at about $30 per bag of food per person. As an introduction, for episodes, since we're just getting started, I want to let everyone know a little bit about myself. I'm a plant-based person who comes from a position of equity. So we talk about all kinds of different things on this podcast, and it's from that perspective. So today is our third episode, and you can see from the title of this episode that today I wanted to talk about how the rich get welfare in this country, and no one talks about it. This is because of the recent debt ceiling limit negotiations that the president and Congress were going through, and some of the items they decided to change, like the SNAP program and forcing older people to have more work requirements, and all the things that they were also trying to get rid of. Republicans are trying to get rid of initially, which they call entitlement programs. But what we realize is that even though people who have less money than others in this country receive help from social programs by the government and assistance, so do corporations, the rich and the wealthy. I mean, if you think about even when Trump was in office, the tax breaks he gave to himself, corporations, rich people who already had money, those are basically it's basically like giving money to them on a social program. And so this can happen in all kinds of ways, like when banks failed, couple banks failed recently, the auto industry failed, those bailouts, that's corporate social welfare that comes from the government, just the same as some people in this country, other people receive social assistance from the government. So there was a woman named Alyssa Courts, and she was on a news program called Democracy Now!, and she wrote a book called Bootstrap, where she talked about this. She actually talked about programs like those bailout for banks and how they're not really different from when other people get assistance from the government, except for the fact that other people are required to verify their income however often, 6 months or whatever, and let them know how much money they're making. But yet banks or the auto industry, they get this money from the government when they so-called need a bailout. They don't have to verify anything, and then they take that money and they put it back into their own pockets of their CEOs or whatever they do with it. Who knows? But they're given that money and provided assistance from the government, just like other people. She also talked about the Homestead Act of 1862, where the government literally gave free land to people, mostly white male settlers. They gave them land to settle the West in this country in 1862 as a form of social assistance from the government. But instead of people looking at it as a handout, like they like to say about other people today, she said they looked at it as a hand up when it was also still basically the same sort of what they would call a handout. It was no different. But yet when these people get into positions of power in this country, never mind the fact that they were given this assistance initially, they like to kind of, demonize everyone else and say that everyone else should be pulling themselves up by their bootstraps. So here's a little bit of the audio from that interview that she gave where she talked about this. I just wanted to play a little bit of that here.
Yeah, I mean, I think even the word entitlement, and part of what I'm doing in this book is looking at the language that people use to demonize people who are financially struggling, this kind of idea of the undeserving poor and the opposite, the deserving rich. So, I mean, if we look at what just happened at Silicon Valley Bank and other banks that have just gotten a bailout, they've gotten entitlements on a massive scale, and yet they're not being shamed and blamed for it like people who are kicked off of welfare rolls, have to recertify for SNAP on a constant basis. And I think we need to look at the double standard that we have for people who are at the top of the pyramid economically and those towards the bottom. So
So what that reminded me of, like her talking about them getting these bailouts on such a massive scale, and they are massive. I mean, we're talking about millions of dollars, where the rest of us who actually are paying into these programs anyway, so we're only getting our own money back, our own tax dollars. Say if you need some sort of assistance, or if you even needed unemployment, or if you needed SNAP benefits or Medicare, Medicaid, whatever it may be, the government uses the money you pay from your check each week for your taxes um, for those programs. So you actually pay for that anyway, and it's your own money. But this reminded me of a saying that Martin Luther King had, because the people who act like they're, you know, above getting assistance, even though they received it anyway in all sorts of ways and on these massive scales, they like to say something like, oh, well, other people should just try to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Well, as Martin Luther King Jr. once said, it's kind of hard to pull yourself up by your bootstraps when you don't have any boots to begin with. So on that note, I will move on to the second part today of our episode. You see from the title that this episode is going to be talking about people, the ignorance that some people had about the Little Mermaid movie this week. So the Little Mermaid movie came out last weekend, and so people were kind of bugging out about the movie a little bit, and the fact that the movie, like, I think, so when I say that people were ignorant about the Little Mermaid, I think it's because they didn't really know anything about the cartoon, which is what the movie is based on. And Black people, especially, since the Little Mermaid in this live action movie was recast as a Black character as the Little Mermaid. So I think people were just ignorant to the cartoon, the original cartoon in general, including me. And I just think a lot of people haven't seen it. And not that I was ignorant about it, but I just hadn't seen it. And I think a lot of people, especially Black people, hadn't seen it either. I seen the trailer, I knew she had red hair and that sort of thing. But but I will say though, like it. So I think they expected more than what they received. So I'm trying to say, and I also did in some ways, because I saw some of the cast interviews before the movie came out, and Melissa McCarthy was talking about. She played the witch Ursula in the live action version. She's like, oh, I was able to give such depth to Ursula, the character, blah blah blah. So I'm thinking, like, okay, when I see this movie, like maybe it's gonna be some in-depth feature film that's like, different than the cartoon, where they go way more in depth to the characters or blah, blah, blah. Well, that wasn't really actually the case. So I did see the film version, and, basically it was just like a cartoon with people in it. Like it wasn't anything different than what the original probably was, even though I only saw like little parts of it and pieces of it. But it was just like the story of the Little Mermaid with people, and they just put like diverse people in it. But the story wasn't anything any different. So it's basically just a cartoon with people in it. So the reason I thought about talking about this today is because, excuse me, in particular, I heard Charlamagne the God, who's like a host or personality on the radio show, The Breakfast Club. You can find it on YouTube if you just search for that if you're ever interested in listening to their show or seeing what he said about this actually. But so he was talking about like a few things about the movie version that he didn't understand. So he said, number one, her father was Black, and he didn't understand. Her father was not Black. Her father was white, he said. And then he said her sisters were like all different races. She had like 7 sisters, and they were all different races or whatever nationalities. And then the third thing was, he said he didn't understand why they didn't set it in the Caribbean, since Sebastian, the crab in the movie, is kind of like her guide or whatever, has a Caribbean accent. He's like, so why didn't they just set it in the Caribbean? So number one, keep in mind that, like I'm saying, this is basically a cartoon. It's based on a cartoon, and it is not any different than a cartoon. So basically, they didn't change anything about the cartoon, which I don't think people realize. Like, if you had never seen the cartoon, you probably expected like more or something different from the movie. So the first thing he mentioned that her dad wasn't white. I mean, that her dad was white. I think he was actually Latin. Latin. I forget the actor's name, but I think that maybe he is. There are some white Latin people. I'm not sure if he is white or his race, but I know he's Latin and he had an accent. Number two, he said all her sisters were all different races. So it's like, okay, again, this is a cartoon. So like if you see a cartoon with siblings in it, like a brother or sister or something, you're not gonna be like, okay, but they don't look alike. I mean, it's a cartoon. It's not something where that even would matter. You know what I mean? So I think so. That's what I mean when I think when I'm saying like people were ignorant about what this was supposed to be. Because it wasn't supposed to be something where they're explaining this or explaining that. No, they're just showing you that cartoon and they just put a bunch of different people in it that they thought were diverse. And so then the last thing was he said, why didn't they set it in the Caribbean? I think that this may have been set in the Caribbean. And I don't know, he missed that, or he may not also know that because he said he thought it was set somewhere like maybe Europe, but Europe, Britain in particular, has they colonized a lot of the Caribbean. So, Jamaica, I believe, at the very least. And then so in the film, if you notice that some of the like the people who are supposed to be commoners who like maybe like work in the castle or something, they had Caribbean accents. The people who were supposed to be supposed royalty, like the queen, the prime minister, her son, had British accents. So it's like, and I have heard, I don't know if this is true, but I've heard like in Jamaica, like in schools, like they don't speak with the patois, which will like what sounds like a Caribbean accent. Like they have to speak like what's called like the king's or queen's English, and they speak with like what is basically a British accent using proper English in schools there. So in the movie, like if you saw somebody, so if you notice that the people who are supposed to be commonplace in the castle were speaking with Korean accents, and the people who were supposed to be like the royals were speaking with British accents, then that would make sense in that way because the British would be the people who came to colonize this place. So they would have the British accent, which the people who are supposed to be more commonplace and workers working in the castle and stuff maybe would speak in the patois with the Korean accent, which is what that showed to me. I'm pretty sure I thought I saw in the film. And then, so they could have been in the Caribbean, is what I'm trying to say. And then at one point, the prince is talking to the Little Mermaid, who again was cast as a Black character. And he's showing her where they're located on a map, and he's like, "This is our island." So So I do think they were supposed to be on an island somewhere. So anyway, that's just in response to what he was saying, what some people were saying, or some issues they had with the movie, which is what I think is a little bit misplaced because I just think they expected too much because they were not aware of what it was actually supposed to be. If you didn't see the original cartoon, you're not going to know. Like you might think it's supposed to be like the Little Black Mermaid or something, which is not what it was. It was just supposed to be the Little Mermaid with people in it. So that was what I think was the issue with what he was saying. So then even moving forward with that in that same vein there. So Charlamagne the God from the Breakfast Club is also on a podcast called Brilliant Idiots with comedian Andrew Schwartz. And so they were also talking about this there, the Little Mermaid again. And then I think also that Charlamagne may have realized after he was initially talking about all this stuff in the Breakfast Club, I think some people pointed some of these things out to him, and he actually realized that it's like, oh, this is just a cartoon. It wasn't supposed to be anything in particular, anything different than what the original was. It just had different kind of like people in it, humans, and it wasn't animated. But so he was talking a little bit about that, and I think he did realize some of these things. They were also talking about someone named Dr. Umar. Now, Dr. Umar is a person who has like these very definitive beliefs that he does not like interracial dating. He does not believe that Black people should date outside their race ever. And so he actually had some comments about The Little Mermaid and another animated film called like Spider-Man in the Universe or Spider-Man Across the Universe or Spider-Man Across the Multiverse, something like that. But anyway, both these films had black characters as the lead. They're two like recent films came out. Now the Spider-Man film is animated. It's actually animated. It's not like with real people in it, but still the Spider-Man in this animated version is a black character. So Dr. Umar was upset because the Little Mermaid was in the live action film, her love interest was the white prince. And then he was also upset because the Spider-Man, the black Spider-Man in the animated film, so these characters have been around forever. So Spider-Man, he's had love interests like MJ, Gwen, whatever. And so Gwen in the animated film is still white. So he's mad that both these characters have love interests that are not black. Because remember, he does not believe that black people should date outside their race. So this just goes back again to, and he didn't see the films. He said something like, I think he saw the trailers, but he didn't see him, and then he heard about one or something. And so this goes back again to maybe being ignorant a little about the subject that you're speaking about. And not to mention the fact that when it comes to Dr. Umar, like I think, like I get what he's his I don't want to say intent because sometimes people say good intentions could pave the road to hell, but I get what his cause is when he says that he doesn't think black people, he thinks black people should create positive black images, which I get that. I understand people wanting to see positive images of black love, romance, marriage, families, things like that. But like I said in episode 2 of the Equal Value podcast, I think that sometimes people want to, or they are misguided in the fact that they're trying to treat the symptom of the problem rather than the actual problem itself. Because what is the issue? Why does he think that black people shouldn't date outside their race? It's because he feels like black people are discriminated against. There's systematic racism in this society, and all this stuff perpetuates a cycle that is ongoing from generation to generation. Okay, so if that is what you think, then maybe what you should be addressing is the fact that there is systematic racism in this country, and then you won't have to worry about who's dating whoever, or whatever, or anyone outside the race. And those problems may address themselves ultimately, but the real issue is the systematic racism. If you get rid of that, then what else is there that's the issue other than whatever you perceive or you like or whatever, whomever you're interested in or attracted to. But so anyway, so I think he's addressing the symptom rather than the problem. Because think about it, if you have a friend, say you have a friend and you're like in school or something, and you say, okay, I don't mess with her because she thinks she's smarter than me. She gets better grades and she thinks she's smarter than me, or she thinks she's better than me, and she this and she that. Okay, so guess what? She's probably still gonna think she's better than you and smarter than you, because you're making this all about her. You're saying she this, she that. So she's still gonna think that because it's all about her still. So the way to address that issue would be to just get better grades in school. So now what? She's not smarter than you. So that's what I mean. You need to address the problem rather than the symptom. And if you don't want to mess with yourself, that's up to you. But I mean on a larger level or scale, just saying like, don't mess with this person because this or that. Well, what's the reason for it? And then maybe you fix the reason. Okay. And so basically, the other thing that Dr. Umar mentioned, aside from that sort of thing, is that, so he goes on like this final rant. He's talking about Spider-Man. And this just speaks to the fact about ignorance of what I was saying of the subject, because, I'm guessing that he didn't see it, or maybe he doesn't know a lot about Spider-Man to begin with, because he also mentions like, what he thinks is going to happen based on the fact that Spider-Man is interracially dating in this animated movie, which is a cartoon. So I'm going to play this clip that they played from the Brilliant Idiots podcast, but keep in mind, I mean, they're laughing because they think it's funny. So you might have to listen like a little bit, like try to listen underneath their laughter so you can hear what he's saying. And this is what Dr. Umar had to say about Spider-Man.
That's more coming. He's putting together the thoughts. Watch me get this download.
Funny how. She probably gonna accuse him of smacking her too. He gonna get locked up. I'm gonna tell you what's gonna happen. Spider-Man calls me because she's gonna accuse him of rape. He's going to get accused of sexual harassment by the Snow Bunny in the cartoon. He's going to go to jail and lose his spidey senses. And they're going to replace him with a snow puppy. And new Spider-Man will get some puppy. That's what they do.
So, if you see what I mean, that doesn't even really make sense because Spider-Man is already white, which is what he's trying to say. He's saying because Spider-Man is interracially dating, like if this were the real world, this is what would happen. Spider-Man would get accused of sexual harassment, he would go to jail, and they're going to replace Spider-Man with the white Spider-Man. Okay, so this is an animated movie, a cartoon. You're saying he's going to get replaced as Spider-Man and there's going to be a white Spider-Man. Spider-Man is already white. Spider-Man has been white. Spider-Man has been around for decades. I don't even know how long. I want to say 100 years, maybe. I don't know. But so now is the difference. Now they put in a black Spider-Man. In both these cases, they put in black people. They put in a black Spider-Man, which is something different than a white Spider-Man. So I understand that Gwen is still white, but they made Spider-Man black. I mean, so, but what you're saying doesn't even make sense because you're actually literally describing the old one. So that's my point about kind of being like ignorant to subject matter, not aware of certain things. So maybe you just should kind of like know, or people need to understand, I guess, be educated, because otherwise things are kind of like misguided or can come off as misguided or not even make any sense, like what he just said there did. Because maybe you don't know the material or the subject matter in the same way. And then, you know, as far as the other stuff he's talking about, to me, like I said, he should be kind of like focusing more on the problem rather than the symptoms or whatever he thinks they are. And then, you know, if you are, Dr. Umar, focusing on what you feel is the problem, then, you know, educate us here at the Equal Value Podcast. Let the rest of us know how you think that is doing that. To me, I feel like there's a larger problem there that should be addressed. And on that note, this is just a quick way to kind of like address a couple things that went on this week and quick check-in. And so before we get out of here, I just want to remind people to continue to use the hashtag made by us too. If you need a reference for it, that hashtag will be labeled in the description of this video. If you use the hashtag made by us too, and you're independent content creators like we are, and there are a lot of you out there, a lot of people out there, then you can redirect your attention and the attention for people who already have that attention in those platforms and quite honestly don't probably really need any more. And that can come around to the rest of us. You redirect your attention, you redirect the wealth. So with that, I want to leave you with the three things we always leave you with on the Equal Value Podcast. And the first one is, you have the exact same value on this planet as anyone else. Remember that. Number two, don't hate, participate. As simple as it sounds. Number three, the key to solving inequality is not begging that others see you as equal. That makes no sense. The key to solving inequality is reminding others that they are not more than equal. So with that, thank you for listening. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to our podcast so that you'll know when we drop a new episode. Thank you for listening. Have a great rest of your day.